Warning. The following program contains content that is intended for mature audiences and may be uncomfortable and triggering. Listener's discretion is advised.
Make sure you take notes.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more."
Okay, now that you're done being edgy, can we start?
All right, fine. But first, let me recite this bit from the Telltale...
Dude, what are you doing? Just start already.
Oh, okay. I'm starting the episode. Jeez. Maybe I can work in Telltale hard at the end of this.
Great, just wait till I'm off the call.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the newest season of Cold Case Chase. With me, as always, is my intrepid, amazing, handsome, and beautiful, and balmy buddy, Shane.
Hello. When you said balmy, I thought you were going with bald, so, you know.
No. I would never do that to you.
Yeah.
Who would ever call you bald? Matt, fast forward to last episode when I called him bald. I listened to that episode today and I went, oh man, I really kind of just went in on that, didn't I?
It's okay, I haven't had hair in like 10 years, so I'm over it.
I'm getting to you eventually. I mean, you see, people at home can't see, but my hair is receding.
Yeah, I was 20 when it started going, and I was 23 when I just decided to shave it. It went quick.
Yeah, I am 22 right now, turning 23 this year, and it's finally starting to show that it's going, and it is going fast. Call that a fire sale. But if you do not know what this show is, why the heck did you click on it? Just kidding. If you don't know what this show is, I recount unsolved mysteries to my friend Shane here, and apparently my dog chimes in every once in a while because he needs attention. Last time we covered Jimmy Hoffa. It was fun. It was mysterious. It was a little dangerous.
It was
but today, are we part of the Get Hoffa squad now? That's my question.
Get Hoffa!
If you haven't listened to that episode, please go listen to it. But today's episode, we're going to be focusing on, I would argue, one of the most famous authors in the world. Would you say that, Shane?
I would.
Because we're focusing...
Say that's an argument. I would just say that's
truth.
I mean...
Would we say the most famous author in the world?
I don't know about the most famous, but I would say up there. I mean, there's a football team named after him.
That is true. Speaking of the football team, we're covering Edgar Allan Poe today. A lot of people, I was talking to Shane before the show, a lot of people, when I told them we were doing this episode, including the writer of this show, John, I told him we're doing Edgar Allan Poe, and they all went, Edgar Allan Poe didn't die mysteriously, or he didn't disappear or whatever. And I said, au contraire, mon frère. He did. We're going to go through a lot of weird things in this story.
I can't wait.
What were the circumstances of Poe's death, and what could have been the cause of his untimely demise? And we're going to figure that out today, Shane. I'm making that a Rukstar promise that we are going to figure out what happened to Edgar Allan Poe today.
It was the angels. They were jealous of him because he had Lenore, and they killed him.
That is so true. He also was we might have to fire up the scumbag alert today for this guy. I apologize to all my Poe fans out there, but when you marry your cousin who's also 13, different times, but they weren't that different, were they?
The Jerry Lewis? Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis.
Probably.
Also married his, I think, 13-year-old cousin.
That is disgusting. Well, we're going to start this story now before I get too depressed.
I mean, we're talking about Poe. You better be depressed.
Oh, that is true. Time to get sad. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, before we dive into Poe's macabre death, let's get a little bit into the man himself and his equally macabre, difficult life. Edgar Allan Poe was born in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, to David Poe Jr. and Elizabeth Arnold Poe, who were both actors. However, tragically, both of his parents were dead within the first 3 years of his life, his father having abandoned the family, and his mother dying of an illness within the same year.
It's not a great start to life.
No.
It is a good start to being a very gothic poet, though.
I mean, he had two choices at that point. It was either become a emo kid or become Batman, and I think he chose poorly, honestly. If I'm gonna be frank, he could have chose Batman, but I guess he didn't have the tech that back then to become Batman. He could have been Raven Man.
There you go.
I think we have a new show on our hands. The Raven Man. Please don't get any ideas. Raven Man is a property of Raving Lunatic Media LLC. I'm copywriting it as we speak right now.
We'll put it underneath the new media network called The Raven Lunatic.
The Raven. I love that way too much for no reason. The boy was then sent to Richmond, Virginia, to live with his godfather, John Allan, a successful merchant who dealt in goods like cloth, wheat, tombstones, tobacco, and slaves.
Sorry, you threw tombstones in there and it was funny, and then you said slaves and it wasn't funny anymore. So I was not laughing at that part.
Could you? Two of these things are not like the others.
Yes.
It's funny, whenever I list things out on this show, just one thing or two things usually stick out.
Yeah.
And it's like never like a subtle thing. It's always like, oh,
yeah.
What?
Yes. He said wheat and then tombstones. I was like, okay.
And then tobacco and then slaves. Poe later enrolled at the University of Virginia when he was 17, where he was, by all accounts, an excellent student. However, his relationship with his godfather was rather strained. Allan had sent Poe to school with less than a third the money needed. As a result, Poe began gambling to try to make up for the lack of financial support from Allan.
Smart.
Honestly, yeah, go bet on black, everybody.
Yeah.
Lunatic Media is not responsible for any money you lose at the gambling den tonight.
Yes, yeah.
At this time, Allan and young Edgar were both upset with one another. Poe's gambling angered the elder Allan, while Poe was upset at Allan for not contributing more to his education. Unfortunately, by the end of his first term, Poe became incredibly poor, to the point where he was burning his own furniture just to stay warm. Ultimately, Poe had to drop out of school. Poe returned to Richmond to find that his fiancée, Elmira Royster, had now married another man. Sad boy hours.
I know.
This was the start.
I know.
Was this the start?
There's so many starts here.
I choose to believe that if Edgar Allan Poe lived in the 21st century, let's say this was happening around like 2007, he would probably be part of Blink-182 at this point, right? Either them or Sleeping with Sirens. I believe they were around at that point. My alternative and emo metal history is not up to date currently. even though it's like the only genre I listen to. Afterwards, in despair over his life change, Poe moved to Boston, his original birthplace, where he enlisted in the United States Army. This was in order to support himself so he could continue writing. However, Poe later enrolled in West Point after his godfather bought Poe's way out of the military. Poe was also soon to be expelled from West Point 8 months after his enrollment, due to his absence from all drills and classes for a week's time. Poe essentially had nowhere to go, at which point he tried to see out relatives of his father in Baltimore. Except, that didn't end very well either, with one of his cousins subsequently robbing him. Could you imagine, like, calling up your cousin just like, hey, I need a place to... Oh, yeah, come over. You get there and he just freaking mugs you.
This could also be another start to his life. I mean, he's got so many tragedies leading up to this that he's going to catch a break soon.
Oh, yeah. One of these days, he'll finally catch a break. Either that or he'll catch something else, you know? The Black Death, was that around? No, that was definitely not around this point. Now, you might be saying to yourself, man, this guy can't really catch a break, or his life must be cursed. You wouldn't be very far off with those observations. From his childhood into his young adult life, Poe seemed to have dealt with a rather, if not cursed, but very unlucky life in misery and hardship. But there's more to come to talk about. So keep on listening, fellow chasers. Because eventually Poe moved in with his aunt, Maria Clem, and thus started a life of relative stability for him. Around the time he moved in with Maria, he also started to publish his short stories. One of these stories won a writing contest, which grew him fame and notoriety and led to him getting an editorial position at the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. It was at this point in Poe's turbulent life that his luck was finally beginning to turn around for the better. And
there's his break, right?
It was...
Story's over.
Yeah, there it is. Yep, you know what? Episode's done. We don't need any more. Poe never died, actually. He's my cousin. I robbed him last week. He's super gullible. Fell for it twice.
He's approaching 220. It's fine.
Yeah. That's why he's so gullible. Around this time, Poe had also fallen in love with Virginia Clem, who was interestingly enough his first cousin and half his age. Shane, just quickly sound the alarm so we can move on with it.
Scumbag alert.
Thank you. Poe and Virginia got married in Richmond in 1835, when Poe was 27 and Virginia was only 13. Now, suffice to say, the circumstances of their union, with their age difference and relation, was considered acceptable back then, whereas nowadays it obviously wouldn't be. And now, it's extremely taboo. But we shouldn't dwell on that strange fact anymore in this episode. In any case, by all accounts, Poe and Virginia's marriage was said to be a very happy one, although it was marked by great money troubles.
That also seems to be a common theme here.
Yeah, Poe don't got money. Man, being creative, like, it just doesn't pay.
Yeah.
If only you could go onto this website, patreon.com/ravinglunatic media, and donate. And become a supporter of the show. You know, that would just be... Yeah. You like that? I like that.
Yeah, except you call it Raving. It's Raven Lunatic.
Oh, Raven. Well, then they're going to get a false domain, and then they're going to donate to that. And then that could be my personal bank trust fund. Oh, Shane, we didn't get any money this month. It's so weird. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm like rolling in money as I'm on the call, like, Just kidding. Please donate to us so we can continue making this awesome content. Poe continued to work writing jobs across the East Coast of the United States. But this alone was completely inadequate for him to maintain a good living. In 1840, Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, his first short story collection, was published, and his pay was, rather than actual money, 25 copies of his own book. Could you imagine if I came up to you and said, "Hey Shane, this was a great episode," and I just gave you like 4 versions of the MP4 file? Not even one you could really listen to on your phone. It was just like, oh, great. I guess you could like burn those books to keep warm.
Here's a bunch of flash drives. Go sell them to make your own money now.
Yeah, exactly right. However, this collection saw the debut of one of his most famous stories, The Fall of the House of Usher. But it wasn't until 5 years later, in 1845, that Poe was finally catapulted into national recognition and acclaim. And that was with the publication by the New York Times of his poem, The Raving. So, because of Poe's success, for a little while, he was able to live comfortably because of his earnings from these publications. But unfortunately, Poe's luck would soon turn for the worst again, and tragedy would strike. Because it was starting with the death of his wife, Virginia, from tuberculosis in 1847, when she was only 24 years old. It devastated Poe to the core, and it was a loss from which he most likely never really recovered from, since it was only 2 years later that Poe himself would be dead. So that brings us to Poe's mysterious and tragic death in 1847. What happened? Well, nobody knows for sure, but here's what we do know based on gathered facts.
Pretty sure he died in 49.
Was it 49?
Mm-hmm.
Please look that up. Am I about to expose John right now?
Yeah. He was born on 1809 and died at 40 in 1849.
So that brings us to Poe's mysterious and tragic death in 1849. What happened? Well, nobody knows for sure, but here's what we do know based on the evidence. There we go. That was probably a miskeystroke. That year, Poe was purportedly in the midst of a wild spree relating to alcohol consumption and abuse. But by the summer of that year, he had achieved sobriety, making his way back to Richmond, and also back to his first fiancée, Elmira Shelton, formerly Elmira Royster. He went back to her, which, I'm not even going to ask you that question, just out of respect for Layla. Love you, Layla. I hope you listen to these episodes. Miss you. The two were once again engaged, and they had plans to marry after Poe returned from a trip. Poe had planned a trip from Richmond to New York City, and he traveled by steamer and stopped off in Baltimore on September 28, 1849. What happened to Poe in those 5 days after that is unknown. According to a letter to Maria Clem, it was Poe's intention to stop in Philadelphia on his way to New York. Ultimately, Poe did not surface again until October 3rd, when he was found by a printer and Baltimore Sun employee named Joseph Walker, either near or inside Gunner's Hall Tavern. Poe was semi-conscious, barely coherent, and dressed in uncharacteristically shabby clothing. Walker asked him if he had any friends in Baltimore. Apparently, Poe was aware enough of his surroundings to recall the name of Dr. Joseph Snodgrass, who lived nearby. Snodgrass.
I like it.
We come across so many weird names at this point.
I feel like he's got a nice twirly mustache. I'm Snodgrass.
Yeah, but like instead of using Tabletop Beard's beard balm or beard oil, he uses just his boogers to really stick it. The Snodgrass. Yeah. Walker wrote to Snodgrass in haste.
Dear sir, there is a gentleman rather the worse for wear at Ryan's Forthward Polls, who goes under the cognomen of Edgar A. Poe, and who appears in great distress, and he says he is acquainted with you, and I assure you he is in need of immediate assistance. Yours, in haste, Joseph W. Walker.
Snodgrass, a physician and writer, as well as friend of Poe's, arrived promptly, soon summoning another friend, Henry Herring, who was Poe's uncle by marriage. Snodgrass later wrote of Poe's condition and appearance, saying the following.
His face was haggard, his hair unkempt, and his whole physique repulsive. His clothing worn and badly fitting, if they could be said to fit at all. The carriage having arrived, we tried to get the object of our care upon his feet, but he was past locomotion. We therefore carried him to the coach as if he were a corpse, and lifted him in the same manner.
This dude roasted the frick out of him. With a name like Snodgrass, you'd think he'd be kind. Snodgrass and Herring, both presuming him to be in a drunken state, took Poe to Washington Medical College, where he was placed under the care of Dr. John Moran. Poe, completely weak and weary, was
tapping upon a chamber door.
Yeah. Poe, completely weak and weary as he rap. Do you think Poe was a good rapper? Do you think he could spit with Tupac and Biggie?
I don't know. He might.
Matt, play part of the epic rap battles of history of Edgar Allan Poe. Rap battles of history. I used to have that one memorized, I'm pretty sure, because I loved that one. As I spit this week in weary, once upon a midnight dreary, as I spit this week in weary, I will choke this poser with his croaky because his tears are weary or something like that. It was stupid. I'm stupid. I don't even know. Time to continue the episode. Poe, completely weak and weary, was brought to a special room reserved for patients ill from intoxication. Poe never regained full consciousness to be able to talk about what was happening to him. Moran wrote to Poe's aunt, Maria Clem, describing Poe's last days. One such thing he wrote was this.
To this state succeeded tremor of the limbs, and at first a busy but not violent or active delirium, constant talking, and vacant converse with spectral and imaginary objects on the walls. His face was pale and his whole person drenched in perspiration. We were unable to induce tranquility before the second day after his admission.
On October 7th, in the early hours before sunrise, Edgar Allan Poe died at the age of 40. There were some reports claiming that the last thing he said before he died was, "Lord help my poor soul." Poe's cause of death was officially recorded as phrenitis, or brain swelling. And 2 days later, Poe was buried in a Baltimore graveyard, in the same plot as his grandfather, in an unmarked grave, with only 10 people attending his burial. And thus, Poe's life and subsequent burial ended with a little ceremony and not much more. And now we get to have fun and talk about some theories of what could have happened to this guy.
I like theories.
Why did he go missing for 5 days? Why did he show up apparently drunk when he had been sober? So many questions that we should be talking about. And I have, let's count them here. I have not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 theories for us today, Shane. And we're going to choose the one that we think is correct. But in my brain, I feel like there's only one that's really correct here. And we're going to have some fun doing it. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Sweet. So our first theory is that Poe died from carbon monoxide or heavy metal poisoning. The argument could be made as it was made by public health researcher Albert Donne in 1999 that the carbon monoxide that could have caused Poe's death was from coal gas. Coal gas was apparently used for indoor lighting during the 19th century. Donne had taken clippings from Poe's hair to test them for certain heavy metals. And the idea being that with the test, it would reveal the presence of coal gas. The results of this test were inconclusive, and many biographers and historians tried to discredit this theory. Despite this, the test did, in fact, reveal elevated levels of mercury in Poe's system months before he died. Poe museum curator Chris Sempner has stated that Poe's mercury levels were likely high because of a cholera epidemic that he'd been exposed to in July of 1849 while he was in Philadelphia at the time. And in order to treat the cholera, Poe's doctor had prescribed calomel or mercury chloride, hence the possibility of mercury poisoning. Sempner also says that the possibility of mercury poisoning could help explain some of Poe's delirium and hallucinations before his death. But the levels of mercury found in Poe's hair are still 30 times below the level consistent with mercury poisoning. Even at its highest level, still below it. Therefore, this is still inconclusive, like many of the following theories that we'll discuss, obviously. So this guy said, I think it's poisoning. Looked into it, said there was mercury in your system. Not enough to kill you. And everybody was like, hey, he had to take mercury like a couple months before because of cholera. And the guy still said, no, I know what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if the symptoms are, in line with mercury poisoning, I get checking, but yeah, if it was 30 times lower than, like you said, then
yeah, I doubt it would be mercury poisoning. Yeah, but it's still a theory thrown out there by somebody fairly recognizable to people who are familiar with Poe.
Very susceptible to mercury.
Maybe
30 times more susceptible than the average person.
Freaking lightweight.
He couldn't even have a can of tuna fish, or it would have driven him mad.
Oh my goodness, could you? Ravens can't eat tuna. Moving on to our second theory. A second and rather popular theory is that Poe died from complications relating to alcoholism. Regarding this, Chris Sempner would say the following. A lot of ideas that have come up over the years have been centered around the fact that Poe couldn't handle his alcohol very well. It has been documented that after a glass of wine, he was staggering drunk. His sister had the same problem. It seems to be something hereditary. This statement highlights the fact that because Poe had always struggled with alcohol in his life, it stands to reason that it could have played a major role in his untimely death. However, months before he died, Poe had become a vocal member of the temperance movement, essentially shunning alcohol. Apparently, Poe had fallen ill in Richmond, and after making an astonishing recovery, he was told by his physician another such attack would prove fatal, to which Poe replied, "If people would not tempt me, I would not fail." This would suggest that his first illness was brought on by a severe bout of drinking. In fact, many people around Poe during his last days were convinced that the author did succumb to his temptations. On October 10th, 1849, a close friend of Poe's, J.P. Kennedy, wrote this. On Tuesday last, Edgar A. Poe died in town, here at the hospital, from the effects of a debauch. He fell in with some companion here who seduced him to the bottle. which it was said that he had renounced some time ago. The consequences were fever, delirium, and madness, and in a few days of termination of his sad career in the hospital. Poor Poe, a bright but unsteady light, has been awfully quenched. The only thing about this theory that is slightly off, nothing explains Poe's disappearance for like 5 days, or even his change of clothing when he was found on October 3rd. Despite this, his death by alcohol was still a super popular theory. And it was propagated by Joseph Snodgrass, who was also a temperance movement member, after his death. On the other hand, modern science had contradicted this stance. Samples of Poe's hair after his death show levels of lead going back to the heavy metal theory. It would certainly indicate Poe's remains. That Poe's remained faithful to his vow of sobriety up until his demise, but who really knows?
I think that, like, a 5-day bender explains, like, being gone for 5 days and waking up in somebody else's clothes.
That could be true. I mean, how many times have you gotten drunk and woken up in somebody else's clothes?
I could count that on one hand. 0.
I just keep all my fingers down like a fist, because that's what's about to go in your face, Rukstar. Shut up. I've only done it 26 times, so I can't talk. I'm looking for number 27. You looking to have some fun this weekend, Shane? I'm a rum guy, if you couldn't. They call me Rumstar when I get drunk.
Rumstar.
Rumstar.
They call me Shane when I get drunk.
They call me Shane, get off the roof. You're scaring us. Don't even talk to me, man! On to theory 3. One interesting theory, and perhaps one of the most bewildering ones, at least from a modern perspective, is that Poe died as a result of cooping. For those who have never heard of this practice, cooping is a term that describes a form of voter fraud practiced by politician parties in the 19th century.
It sounds like a
in short,
viral challenge.
Yo guys!
Another teen claimed by cooping this week.
It's like the planking epidemic all over again. Honestly, bring cooping back. We kind of need it at this point, man. Honestly, I think we're still doing cooping. We're just actually calling it what it is now, just voter fraud. In short, cooping victims were kidnapped, beaten, disguised, and then forced to vote for the gang's candidate multiple times under different names. It would explain a few things: why Poe was not dressed in his normal clothes, and why he was found outside of Gunner's Hall Tavern, which was also a polling place for elections. During this period, voters would often be given some alcohol after voting as a celebration. So because of Poe's genetic sensitivity to alcohol, if he was forced to vote more than once, making him drink a couple times, it could have explained the state of intoxication that he was found in. On top of that, it might not even be a coincidence that Poe was found delirious after the fact on Election Day.
And in somebody else's clothes. Was he in disguise as another person?
Yeah. So what they would do is they would like force you to dress up as other people and like make you go and like these gangs would just make you go and vote for their candidate and stuff.
Nice.
And like when you would vote for them, they would like come out and you'd like, oh, here's a drink. And the theory is that Poe went and voted for the person that they wanted. He came out, they gave him a drink, and he was like, oh, I want more of this. And they're like, hey, you want to do that again? So yeah. So he did it again, but in a different costume, had another drink, went back out, changed costumes again, and kept doing it until he was drunk on a bender. Would explain why he was missing for 5 days, because kind of like we said, if he was on a bender, he's gone. Explains why he was dressed in somebody else's clothing, as well as outside of a tavern that was known to be a voting poll station.
All right.
I'm going to continue with my other theories, but I feel like we know where Matt's going on this. Our second to last theory, which is a fairly recent one that has gained a lot of traction, so John decided to put it in here, is that Poe died from a brain tumor, which may have influenced his behavior prior to succumbing. 26 years after Poe's death and burial, a statue honoring Poe was erected near the entrance of the graveyard. The coffin was dug up, and Poe's remains were exhumed so that they could be moved to a new place of honor. However, the 2 decades of being buried underground were not kind to the coffin or Poe. Not much really remained of his body, but one worker remarked that an odd feature of Poe's skull, a mass rolling around on the inside. The newspapers of the day claimed that the mass was just Poe's shriveled brain. However, today, because of modern science, we know that the mass could not be his brain, since that would be one of the first parts of his body to rot post-death. That is how the theory that the mass in Poe's brain could have been a tumor. Apparently, according to Chris Sempner, a New York physician once told Poe that he had a lesion on his brain, which would explain his adverse reactions to alcohol.
Okay.
So that theory kind of talks about his tumor. We might be doing a little bit of theory combining a little bit later. Kind of like pick and choose what we like from each theory. I like this one. It's my personal one. And our final theory is that Poe was actually murdered, or more specifically, beaten nearly to death after drinking. It is entirely possible that since Poe would become heavily inebriated after only one drink, unable to hold his liquor, he would have been an incredibly easy target for ruffians to come, beat him, and possibly rob or steal from him. Indeed, if this had happened, it would explain Poe's shabby clothing, as, to point out again, Poe was not known to wear cheap, ragged, or ill-fitting clothing. There are also even a few theories that a potential beating could have been because of a woman. According to biographer E. Oakes Smith and a 1867 article, he would say the following: "At the instigation of a woman who considered herself injured by him, he was cruelly beaten, blow upon blow, by a ruffian who knew of no better mode of avenging supposed injuries. It is well known that a brain fever followed." Eugene... I read that completely wrong. His name is Eugene Didier. I thought it said Eugene Diddler. And I was like, uh-oh. Not the Diddler. Eugene Didier had written in his The Grave of Poe, published in 1872, that while Poe was in Baltimore, he ran into old friends from West Point, who prevailed upon him to join them for drinks. Poe, unable to handle liquor, became crazy drunk after one glass of champagne, after which he left his friends to wander the streets. It was in his drunken state that he, in quote, was robbed and beaten by ruffians and left insensible in the street all night. Another dimension to this theory involves premeditated murder. The most characteristic theory for cold case chase, as our audience well knows. In the book Midnight Dreary, The Mysterious Death of Edgar Allan Poe, author Joe Evangelist Poe posits the theory that Poe was murdered by the brother of his affluent fiancée, Elmira Shelton. In short, the brothers would have drugged Poe with alcohol and brutally beaten him to death. According to Walsh in his book, Shelton's 3 brothers had warned Poe against marrying their sister. Walsh suggests that Poe made it to Philadelphia, where he was subsequently ambushed and warned by Shelton's brother. Poe, who would have been frightened by this experience, would have disguised himself in new secondhand clothes and gone into hiding in Philadelphia for a week, after which time he would have headed back to Baltimore. Walsh also contests that when Poe tried to sneak back to Richmond, Shelton's brother would have found him in Baltimore, beaten him, drugged him with alcohol, and then almost killed him. This would have resulted in Poe becoming deathly ill, as was apparently the sinister intention of Shelton's brothers. But again, who knows, because no one can account for the 5 days that Poe was actually missing. Like most of the other theories, no one can say for sure. So there you have it. 5 of the many theories of Poe's mysterious death. We didn't cover some of the less sinister ones, just as his death from a variety of illnesses or diseases, including rabies, actually, apparently. The flu, syphilis, epilepsy, and cholera, amongst others. We also didn't cover the theory that Poe had maybe committed suicide by way of drinking himself to death, among other means. However, having discussed some of these theories, the interesting thing is that none of these theories seem to rule out any of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's entirely possible that, like I said earlier, bits of each theory carry some plausibility and could have all contributed to Poe's death. But no one can really say for sure, I guess. All we know is that whatever did happen to Poe, it was grisly, tragic, and a rather fitting end to the life of the brilliant yet tormented Edgar Allan Poe. So Shane,
Yes.
got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
What the frick happened to Mr. Edgar Allan Poe?
I'm going to start by inserting something from his deathbed. Layla touches on this in one of her episodes of Case the Chills, but on his deathbed, Edgar Allan Poe references Croatoan, which was carved into the post in the Roanoke village when all the people disappeared. Go listen to that. Also a weird
Please
tie-in. But that also leads into, I'm going to go with the theory that he had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
He was already, I think that you could combine brain tumor and drinking and it just finally putting him over the edge. And if he had a brain lesion, and then even saying Croatoan, the guy was very literally solid, so I'm sure he knew about the Roanoke Island and everything already, so it was probably on his mind a lot for the way he was mentally anyway. So, I don't know. I think that, I'm gonna go with brain tumor. Final answer.
I like that theory. Like I said before, my personal theory is that the cooping, but I want to combine it with also the brain tumor, and obviously he was drinking as well. I think those kind of 3 things just mixing together were probably the end of Poe. Apparently cooping was rampant at around this time, either spiking the year before or the year after, I believe he died. Which, I mean, hey, that his death could have contributed to it. That is 100% for sure. I think that cooping was part of it, though, because the one part of me that's like, why would he be dressed in shabby clothing is my biggest thing. But, I mean, hey, apparently we both have been in other people's clothing. I'm actually wearing your underwear right now, Shane. And your left sock, not your right one, though. There were a few holes in it.
That's where the other sock goes.
Yeah. But to wrap us up here, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us for today. It was a lot of fun. I think we solved Edgar Allan Poe, like I said at the top of this podcast. What do you think, Shane? Did we solve Edgar Allan Poe?
Yeah, we solve everything here.
That is true, we do. And the ones that we really can't solve, we just give them to Ted Cruz, and we say that he did it. We could probably find a tie-in somewhere. Ted Cruz, you ever been to Baltimore? I just realized Poe died in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's why it's the Baltimore Ravens.
So the Ravens is just a giant, like, hey, this guy died here.
Yep, it's an ode to Edgar Allan Poe.
Also,
I'm not gonna say anything, but I am gonna ask: have you ever seen Edgar Allan Poe and Ted Cruz at the same place at the same time?
I haven't. Is Edgar Allan Poe Ted Cruz? Like, he could have chosen to be Batman. I guess he chose to be Ted Cruz instead. All done. Sit.
I am.
But we're going to end this off. I want to say thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you to all the people who subscribe on Patreon or have donated to the GoFundMe for Zodiac Task Force, which you can go check out the Minimalist teaser and also probably by now the Scene 1 teaser. You can go check those out on youtube.com/Raving Lunatic Media. Go give us a like, a follow, a subscription, ring that notification bell so you are caught up on everything. You should also rate this podcast 5 stars if you can on Apple or Spotify, because every little bit counts and we need to take over the algorithm. That's what we're here for, right, Shane?
That's correct. The algorithm doesn't know us, but it knows you. So tell him, it, her, the thing.
It's a guy. First name Al, last name Gorhythm.
Okay. Tell Al that you like us.
Tell Al that you like us. Also, make sure to check out the other awesome shows on Raving Lunatic Media. Check out Sci-Fi Malady. Check out Zodiac Task Force. Check out Zodiac Task Force Lost Transmissions. Also, check out The Janitor, which will be dropping come October. With that, Shane, impart some hot... I almost said slutty. I don't know why. Some hot, sexy knowledge on us.
It's gonna be summer, or it is summer now. So make sure you're using some sunscreen with the good SPF, because you don't want to burn, and don't let a burger on your barbecue prevent you from fire safety.
Yes. Make sure all of our bald friends wear sunscreen on the top of their heads as well.
Yes, that is very important.
Yes. I'm going to need to start learning how to do that soon. So. With that being said, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Cold Case
Chase.
He did the thing!